You pour your heart into relationships, yet people seem indifferent to your presence and contributions. Every conversation feels like you're speaking into a void, while others effortlessly command attention and genuine interest from everyone around them. I am Dale Carnegie, and I spent decades studying human nature, teaching millions how to win friends and influence people through the simple art of making others feel genuinely important. What I discovered about human psychology will transform every relationship in your life, from your closest family to your most challenging colleagues. The principles I'll share aren't just social techniques, they're the foundation of all meaningful human connection. Whether you're building friendships, advancing your career, or strengthening your family bonds, mastering the art of making others feel important is the key to everything. But first, like this video, subscribe for more life-changing insights, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready for transformation. I was born into poverty on a Missouri farm in 1888, where survival meant working from dawn until dusk just to keep food on our table. My father, James William Carnegie, was a man who owned little but understood much about human nature. Every evening, after we'd finished our chores, he would pull out his worn leather Bible, its pages yellowed and margins filled with his careful handwriting. But this wasn't just Bible study. My father had discovered something profound about human dignity that would shape everything I later taught the world. He treated every person who walked onto our farm, whether they were wealthy landowners, traveling salesmen, or struggling neighbors, with the same genuine respect and interest. I remember watching him talk with old Tom Henderson, a man who'd lost his farm to debt and now wandered from place to place looking for work, while others in town whispered about Tom's failures. My father would sit with him on our porch, asking about his family, listening to his stories, and making him feel like the most important person in the world. Tom would leave our farm walking taller, his shoulders squared with dignity restored. "Son," my father would tell me as we watched Tom disappear down the dusty road, "every person carries something valuable inside them. Your job isn't to judge what they've lost or failed at. Your job is to find that valuable thing and help them remember it exists." Those margin notes in his Bible weren't just scripture references. They were reminders of people he'd met, their stories, their dreams, their struggles. He taught me that remembering details about people's lives wasn't just politeness, it was a sacred duty. When Mrs. Patterson mentioned her sick grandchild, he'd ask about the child's recovery weeks later. When the blacksmith talked about his son's wedding, father would remember to congratulate him the next time we were in town. I watched my father transform sullen strangers into family friends simply by treating them as if they mattered. He never had money to give, but he gave something more precious, the gift of feeling genuinely important to another human being. This was my first glimpse into the power that would later revolutionize millions of relationships. I was witnessing the fundamental truth that humans don't just want to feel important, they need it as much as they need food and shelter. My father was feeding souls on that Missouri farm, one conversation at a time. That worn Bible with its margin notes became my first textbook in human relations, though I wouldn't understand its full significance until years later when I stood terrified before my first audience, desperate to connect with people who seemed as distant as strangers. Years later, when I moved to New York City in 1912, I was a young man drowning in a sea of strangers. I had left the farm with dreams of becoming an actor, but Broadway had no interest in a Missouri farm boy with more ambition than talent. Desperate for income, I took a job selling correspondence courses for the international correspondence schools. But here's what changed everything. I was terrified of public speaking, yet I knew I needed to master it to succeed in sales. So I did something that seemed insane at the time. I volunteered to teach a public speaking course at the YMCA on 125th Street. Despite being more afraid of audiences than anyone I knew, my first class was a disaster of epic proportions. I stood before 12 adults, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold my notes. My voice cracked like a teenager's, and sweat poured down my face despite the cool evening air. I wanted to run from that room and never return, but something miraculous happened during that humiliating first session. When I finally stopped trying to impress my students with my non-existent expertise and started listening to their stories, everything changed. There was Margaret, a secretary who wanted to speak up in meetings but felt invisible. There was Frank, a shop foreman who needed to address his workers but feared their ridicule. There was elderly Mrs. Cohen, who simply wanted to feel confident talking to her grandchildren. As each person shared their fears and dreams, I made a discovery that would transform my life when I focused entirely on making them feel important and heard. My own terror disappeared. The more interested I became in their success, the less self-conscious I felt about my own inadequacies. I began asking each student about their background, their goals, their previous experiences with speaking. I remembered details from week to week: Margaret's upcoming presentation, Frank's new safety protocol, Mrs. Cohen's granddaughter's graduation. When students saw that I genuinely cared about their individual journeys, they began to open up in ways that surprised us all. Frank, the shy foreman, started sharing stories about his work challenges. Margaret began offering encouragement to other students. Mrs. Cohen became the class cheerleader, celebrating everyone's small victories. By focusing on making each person feel valued and important, I had accidentally created something beautiful, a community of people who were transforming together. That first YMCA class roster became precious to me. Each name represented a human being who had taught me that the secret to overcoming fear wasn't courage, it was caring more about others than about yourself. When you're genuinely focused on making someone else feel important, there's no room left in your mind for self-doubt. This revelation became the foundation of everything I would later teach. The terror that had nearly destroyed me became the very thing that led me to discover the power of making others feel genuinely important. In 1908, before I had even discovered my calling as a teacher, I had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Dale Carnegie, the steel magnate whose name I coincidentally shared. I was working as a salesman then, struggling to make ends meet, when a magazine assignment brought me face to face with one of America's richest and most powerful men. I expected to meet an intimidating titan of industry. Instead, I found a surprisingly warm man who greeted me by name at his door. Not just young man or the reporter, but Dale Carnegie. He had taken the time to learn my name before our meeting, and throughout our 3-hour conversation, he used it naturally and frequently. "Dale," he said, settling into his chair, "tell me about yourself before we discuss my story." This caught me completely off guard. Here was a man whose time was worth thousands of dollars per hour, yet he seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my humble background and aspirations. As I shared my story, the Missouri farm, my dreams of success, my struggles in New York, Kai watched his face carefully. He wasn't just being polite. He was truly listening. He asked follow-up questions about my family, my father's wisdom, my hopes for the future. For nearly an hour, this industrial giant made a struggling young salesman feel like the most important person in the world. Then Carnegie shared something that changed my understanding of human psychology forever. "Dale," he said, leaning forward with intensity, "I can take a person's ordinary metal and turn it into steel worth millions. But I've learned something far more valuable. I can take an ordinary person and help them discover the steel within themselves. The secret isn't in manipulating people. It's in finding what makes them feel genuinely important and valuable. He told me about his workers, how he learned their names, their families, situations, their personal goals. He described walking through his factories, stopping to ask about a worker's sick child, or congratulating someone on a family achievement. When people feel important to you, he explained, they'll move mountains to justify that importance. Before I left, Carnegie handed me a handwritten note that I still treasure today. It read, Dale Carnegie remembered that a person's name is to them the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Use it often, use it warmly, and watch how it transforms every relationship. That meeting planted a seed that would grow. For years, Carnegie had shown me something profound. The most successful people aren't those who dominate others, but those who have mastered the art of making others feel genuinely important. He had demonstrated that whether you're running a steel empire or teaching a night class, the fundamental principle remains the same: people will follow you, support you, and love you when you make them feel valued and significant. Years later, when I developed my courses and wrote my books, Andrew Carnegie's lesson echoed through every principle I taught. The richest man I ever met had shown me the most valuable currency in human relationships: making others feel important. By 1920, my teaching had evolved far beyond public speaking. I had discovered that the principles making my students successful speakers were the same ones transforming their entire lives. So I began what would become a 20-year study of human behavior, carefully observing and documenting what separated those who effortlessly attracted others from those who struggled in loneliness. I carried a small research journal everywhere, recording conversations, noting patterns, and testing theories. What I discovered challenged everything I thought I knew about human attraction and influence. Most people, I observed, approach relationships backward. They focus intensely on being interesting, crafting clever stories, accumulating impressive achievements, developing witty responses. But the magnetic individuals I studied did something completely different. They became intensely interested in others. I watched a successful businessman at a dinner party. While others competed to share their accomplishments, he spent the evening asking thoughtful questions. How did you develop that innovative approach? What inspired you to make that career change? What's been the most rewarding part of raising your children? By the end of the evening, everyone was drawn to him. Though he had shared almost nothing about himself, the difference between fake interest and genuine interest became crystal clear through my observations. Fake interest asks surface questions, while mentally preparing the next story to tell. Genuine interest asks follow-up questions, remembers details from previous conversations, and seeks to understand the person's deeper motivations and dreams. I tested this principle systematically. At social gatherings, I would spend entire evenings focused solely on learning about others, their passions, challenges, backgrounds, aspirations. The results were remarkable. People would seek me out weeks later, calling me fascinating despite my having said little about myself. One evening, I met a woman who seemed withdrawn and uninterested in conversation. Instead of writing her off, I began asking about her work as a librarian. What draws people to certain books? I asked. How do you help someone find exactly what they need? Her entire demeanor transformed as she shared her passion for connecting people with knowledge. By showing genuine curiosity about something she cared deeply about, I had unlocked her enthusiasm and warmth. This became my golden discovery. Everyone has something they're passionate about, something that makes them feel alive and important. When you find that thing and show authentic interest in it, you've found the key to their heart. I learned to listen for what I called energy words, topics that made people's voices rise, their gestures become animated, their eyes light up. When someone mentioned their garden, their grandchildren, their hobby, their hometown, or their work challenges, I would lean in and ask deeper questions. What made you fall in love with gardening? What's the most surprising thing your grandchildren have taught you? How did you develop that unique approach to your work? The journal filled with countless examples of this principle in action. A shy accountant became vibrant when discussing his weekend photography. A stern executive softened completely when talking about her rescue dogs. A quiet teenager opened up when I asked about his music. Genuine interest, I realized, is the master key to human connection. It makes people feel important, not through flattery or manipulation, but through the authentic experience of being truly seen and valued for who they are. Asterisk, the most important letter I ever received came from a woman named Sarah, a student in my 1925 course who wrote to me 3 months after graduation. Her words still echo in my mind. Mr. Carnegie, I need to tell you something. The night before your first class, I had decided to end my life. I felt completely invisible, like no one in the world cared whether I existed. But in that first session, when you looked at me and really listened not just to my words, but to what I was feeling, something inside me shifted. For the first time in months, I felt like I mattered to another human being. That letter taught me the difference between hearing and listening, between surface conversation and the kind of deep attention that can literally save lives. Sarah's transformation began not with my teaching, but with my listening. I had discovered what I came to call the listening revolution, the power to transform any relationship by learning to listen not just to words, but to the emotions, fears, and dreams behind those words. Most people, I realized, had never experienced being truly heard in their entire lives. Real listening, I learned, requires tremendous discipline. It means setting aside your own agenda, your clever responses, your urge to share similar experiences. It means focusing entirely on understanding what the other person is really trying to communicate, both the words they're saying and the feelings they might not even recognize themselves. I developed what I called the 3 levels of listening. The first level is waiting to talk you hear enough to respond, but you're mentally preparing your next comment. The second level is focused hearing you, understand the words, and can repeat them back accurately. But the third level, transformational listening, goes deeper. You listen for emotions, for what's not being said, for the hopes and fears underlying the conversation. When someone says, "I'm fine with the decision," transformational listening hears the slight hesitation, the tension in their voice. It responds with, "You sound like you might have some concerns about it." When someone mentions they're keeping busy after a loss, deep listening recognizes the pain they're trying to mask and offers gentle space for their real feelings. I practiced this intensively. In conversations, I would listen for what I called feeling words: frustrated, excited, worried, hopeful, overwhelmed, proud. When someone used these words, I would reflect back what I heard. "It sounds like you're really excited about this opportunity," or "I can hear how frustrated you've been with this situation." The results amazed me. People would stop mid-sentence, look at me with surprise, and say, "Yes, that's exactly how I feel." Then they would open up in ways that transformed our entire relationship. By simply reflecting back their emotions, I was giving them the gift of feeling understood. I learned that most people don't need advice, they need to feel heard. When someone shares a problem, our instinct is to offer solutions. But what they really want first is validation that their feelings make sense, that their struggle is understood, that they're not alone in their experience. Deep listening became my most powerful tool for making others feel important. When you truly listen to someone, you're telling them that their thoughts, feelings, and experiences matter enough to deserve your complete attention. Asterisk, the most painful lesson about validation came from my own home. I discovered this truth through my wife Dorothy's diary, which she shared with me during a difficult period in our marriage. Her entry from March 15th, 1928. Read. Dale teaches thousands of people how to make others feel important, yet I often feel like my feelings don't matter to him. He corrects my facts, argues with my opinions, but rarely validates how I feel about things. Reading those words was like being struck by lightning. Here I was, teaching the world about human relations, while failing to apply the most fundamental principle with the person I loved most. That diary entry launched what I came to call my validation revolution, both personally and in my teaching. I realized that validation and agreement are completely different things. You can validate someone's feelings without agreeing with their conclusions. You can acknowledge their emotions without endorsing their actions. The magic phrase that changed everything was, "I can understand how you would feel that way." When Dorothy felt overwhelmed by household responsibilities, my old approach was to point out everything she had accomplished and remind her that other wives had it worse. This, I thought, was being helpful, but I was actually invalidating her feelings by suggesting they weren't reasonable or justified. My new approach revolutionized our relationship. I can see how managing all of this would feel overwhelming. Tell me more about what's been the most stressful part. Suddenly, instead of defending her feelings, Dorothy felt heard. Instead of trying to convince me she had a right to feel stressed, she could focus on solving the actual problems. I began studying the difference between validation and invalidation in all my interactions. Invalidation sounds like, "You shouldn't feel that way. That's not a big deal. At least you don't have my problems," or "You're being too sensitive." Validation sounds like, "That sounds really difficult. I can see why you'd feel upset about that," or "Your feelings make complete sense given what you've experienced." The transformation in my classes was remarkable. When students shared fears about public speaking, instead of immediately offering techniques to overcome fear, I started with, "Of course, your nervous speaking in front of people is one of humanity's greatest fears. Anyone in your position would feel anxious." This simple validation created safety that made them more receptive to learning. I discovered that people have an emotional thermostat. When their feelings are invalidated, their emotional temperature rises. They become defensive, argumentative, or withdrawn. But when their feelings are validated, their emotional temperature lowers, allowing them to think clearly and remain open to new perspectives. One of my students, a father struggling with his teenage son, applied this principle with stunning results. Instead of arguing with his son's complaints about school being stupid and pointless, he tried, "I can understand feeling frustrated when things don't seem relevant to your life. Tell me more about what's been bothering you most." This simple shift from argument to validation opened the first real conversation they'd had in months. Validation became one of my most powerful tools for making others feel important. When you validate someone's emotions, you're essentially saying, "Your inner experience matters. Your feelings are worthy of acknowledgement. You are important enough that I want to understand your world." The key is authenticity. False validation feels manipulative and creates distance. But genuine validation, truly trying to understand and acknowledge another person's emotional experience, the foundation for all meaningful connection. In 1929, I received a letter that taught me the difference between appreciation and flattery, a distinction that would become crucial to everything I taught about making others feel genuinely important. The letter came from Theodore Roosevelt, responding to a note I had sent acknowledging his remarkable ability to remember personal details about everyone he met. Roosevelt's reply was illuminating. "My dear Carnegie, your letter means more to me than you might imagine, not because you praised me, but because you noticed something specific that I work hard to achieve. True appreciation," he wrote, "recognizes effort and character, not just results and appearances." This letter crystallized something I had been observing but hadn't fully understood. Flattery is about the person giving it trying to gain favor, influence, or advantage. Appreciation is about the person receiving it genuinely recognizing their qualities, efforts, or impact. I began studying the appreciation patterns of the most beloved leaders I knew. They didn't scatter generic compliments like confetti. Instead, they developed what I called appreciation, precision, the ability to notice and acknowledge specific qualities, efforts, and contributions that others might overlook. When a factory foreman I knew wanted to motivate his workers, he didn't just say, "Good job." He would say, "Jim, I noticed how you helped train the new worker yesterday, even though you were behind on your own quota." That kind of mentorship is what makes this whole team stronger. This specific appreciation recognized character, not just performance. I learned to distinguish between surface appreciation and depth appreciation. Surface appreciation focuses on obvious achievements. Congratulations on your promotion. Depth appreciation recognizes the qualities that made the achievement possible. I've watched how you handled difficult customers with such patience and creativity. Your promotion is well-deserved because you genuinely care about solving people's problems. The most powerful appreciation I discovered was what I called identity appreciation, acknowledging not just what someone does, but who they are. When I told a struggling student, "You have the heart of an encourager. I've watched you lift up every person in this class," I wasn't just praising behavior. I was affirming their identity as someone who makes others feel important. I developed a practice of keeping what I called my appreciation journal. Each day, I would write down one specific thing I genuinely appreciated about someone I interacted with. Not their clothes or their success, but their character, their effort, their unique way of contributing to the world. When I appreciated my secretary, I didn't just thank her for typing letters. I said, "Eleanor, I appreciate how you anticipate what I need before I even ask. Your thoughtfulness makes everything run smoothly, and it allows me to focus on teaching." When I appreciated a janitor at the YMCA, I didn't just say he did good work. I said, "Mr. Patterson, I appreciate how you take pride in creating a welcoming environment. When people walk into a clean, well-maintained building, they feel valued before they even speak to anyone." The impact was profound. People would light up in ways I had never seen before. They would stand straighter, speak with more confidence, and begin treating others with the same appreciation they had received. But here's what surprised me. Most appreciation transformed the giver as much as the receiver. When I actively looked for things to genuinely appreciate in others, I began seeing the world differently. Instead of focusing on what was wrong with people, I trained my mind to notice what was right with them. This shift made me more positive, more grateful, and ultimately more attractive to others. People want to be around someone who sees their value, who notices their efforts, who appreciates their unique contributions to the world. Asterisk. The most treasured collection in my office wasn't awards or certificates. It was a thick folder of before and after letters from students whose lives had been transformed not by my teaching techniques, but by strategic encouragement. These letters taught me that encouragement isn't just kindness. It's one of the most powerful forces for human transformation. The letter that changed my understanding came from Robert, a man who had attended my course in 1932. His before letter was heartbreaking. "Mr. Carnegie, I am 42 years old and have never succeeded at anything. I have no confidence, no prospects, and no reason to believe that will ever change. I'm attending your course as a last resort." His after letter, written 6 months later, was extraordinary. "I want you to know that I have been promoted to department manager. My relationship with my wife has completely transformed. And for the first time in my adult life, I believe in myself." But the turning point wasn't any technique you taught. It was when you looked me in the eye and said, "Robert, I see tremendous potential in you, and I believe you're going to surprise yourself with what you accomplish. That letter taught me the difference between empty encouragement and what I came to call potential recognition. Empty encouragement says, you can do anything. Potential recognition says, I see specific qualities in you that make me believe you can achieve this particular goal. I learned to study people carefully, looking for genuine strengths they might not recognize in themselves. When I saw a shy student ask thoughtful questions, I would say, you have the gift of asking questions that make everyone think more deeply. That's a rare and valuable quality. When I noticed someone helping a struggling classmate, I would point out, you have a natural ability to see what people need and step in to help. That's leadership. The key was being specific about what I saw and why it mattered. Instead of generic phrases like you're talented, I learned to say things like, you have an ability to explain complex ideas in simple terms that everyone can understand. That's going to serve you well in any leadership role. I discovered that most people suffer from what I called strength blindness. They can't see their own positive qualities and abilities. They focus intensely on their weaknesses, while being completely oblivious to their strengths. Encouragement helps people see themselves through different eyes. One of my most powerful tools became what I called future pacing, helping people see themselves succeeding in specific situations. When a nervous student worried about giving presentations at work, I wouldn't just say you'll be fine. I would paint a detailed picture. I can see you standing confidently in front of your colleagues, sharing ideas that make everyone nod in recognition. Your thoughtful approach and genuine care for solving problems will make people want to listen to what you have to say. I learned that encouragement must be believable to be effective. If someone had never succeeded at anything, telling them they could accomplish everything would feel false. But helping them see one specific strength and one realistic next step could ignite hope and momentum. The most important discovery was that encouragement creates what I called positive expectancy. When you genuinely believe in someone's potential and express that belief specifically and consistently, they begin to believe it themselves. And when people believe in their own potential, they start acting in ways that make that potential reality. I watched this transformation hundreds of times. Students who had been convinced they were failures began taking small risks, speaking up in meetings, pursuing opportunities they had never considered. The encouragement didn't just make them feel better, it actually changed their behavior and, ultimately, their results. Encouragement became my secret weapon for making others feel important. When you see potential in someone and help them see it too, you're giving them one of the most valuable gifts possible. A new story about who they are and what they're capable of becoming. Asterisk, the most humbling lesson of my career came from a debate contest scorecard I still keep as a reminder of my greatest failure. In 1915, before I understood the principles I would later teach, I won a formal debate about workers' rights. I had demolished my opponent's arguments with superior facts, sharper logic, and more persuasive rhetoric. I walked away victorious, according to the judges' scorecard, and completely defeated, according to the only measure that truly mattered. My opponent, a factory owner named Charles Morrison, left that debate more convinced than ever that workers' rights advocates were arrogant intellectuals who didn't understand business realities. My victory had actually strengthened his resistance to the very changes I wanted to create. I had won the argument and lost the relationship, proven my point and hardened his position. That scorecard taught me a truth that revolutionized how I handled disagreement. Being right is often wrong if your goal is influence and connection. I realized that making someone feel stupid or defeated doesn't change their mind, it makes them more determined to prove you wrong. I began studying how the most influential people I knew handled controversy and disagreement. They had mastered what I came to call the art of graceful disagreement, the ability to maintain relationship while navigating difference. The first principle I discovered was what I called the dignity preservation rule. Before expressing any disagreement, find something you can genuinely acknowledge or appreciate about their perspective. Charles, I can see you're genuinely concerned about keeping your business profitable so you can continue providing jobs. That's a worthy goal, and I share your concern about sustainability. This approach immediately lowered defensiveness because it showed I wasn't attacking their character or motives, was simply offering a different perspective on achieving goals we both valued. The second principle was the curious questioner strategy. Instead of stating why they were wrong, I learned to ask questions that helped them discover problems with their own position. What do you think might happen to worker productivity if people feel their basic needs aren't being met? How do you think employees might respond if they felt more valued and secure? These questions weren't traps designed to embarrass, they were genuine invitations to think together about complex problems. When people reach conclusions through their own thinking rather than having conclusions imposed on them, they're much more likely to embrace new perspectives. I developed what I called the bridge-building approach to controversial topics. Instead of starting with disagreement, I would look for common ground and build from there. We both want businesses to thrive and workers to have good lives. The question is how we achieve both goals simultaneously. The most powerful technique I discovered was the respectful reframe. When someone made a statement I disagreed with, instead of attacking their position, I would reframe it in terms of underlying values and concerns. If someone said, "Workers today are lazy and entitled," I might respond with, "It sounds like you're frustrated because you value strong work ethic and personal responsibility. Those are important values. What do you think creates the conditions where people naturally want to work hard and take ownership?" This approach acknowledged their values while opening space for different perspectives on how to honor those values. I learned that the goal of navigating controversy isn't to win debates, it's to create understanding, preserve relationships, and plant seeds of new thinking. When people feel respected and heard, they become curious about your perspective. When they feel attacked and diminished, they become defensive and closed. The ultimate test of graceful disagreement is this: can the other person walk away feeling that their dignity remained intact, even if their mind was changed? When you master this art, you can influence without alienating, correct without destroying, and disagree without damaging the relationship. Asterisk, the most important letter I ever wrote was a public apology, and it taught me that mistakes could become relationship opportunities if handled with wisdom and grace. In 1934, I made a serious error in judgment that nearly destroyed my reputation and cost me the respect of hundreds of students. During a lecture in Chicago, I shared what I believed was an inspiring story about a successful businessman's rise from poverty. The story was compelling, emotionally powerful, and completely fabricated. I had confused details from multiple people's lives and, in my enthusiasm to motivate my audience, had presented fiction as fact. Within days, several students had fact-checked my story and discovered the inconsistencies. Word spread quickly through my network. I faced a choice that would define my character. I could minimize the error, blame faulty research, or make excuses about good intentions. Instead, I chose a path that terrified me, but ultimately transformed how I understood integrity and human relationships. I wrote a public letter acknowledging my mistake fully and without reservation. I shared a story that was not factually accurate. In my desire to inspire, I allowed enthusiasm to override accuracy. This was wrong, and I take complete responsibility. You trusted me with your time and attention, and I violated that trust. I am deeply sorry, but here's what made that apology transformational. I didn't stop with admitting fault. I also addressed how I would prevent similar mistakes in the future. I am implementing a rigorous fact-checking process for all stories I share. More importantly, I am recommitting to the principle that inspiration must be built on truth, not fiction. The response astonished me. Instead of losing credibility, I gained deeper respect from my students. Instead of viewing me as perfect and therefore unreachable, they saw me as human and therefore trustworthy. My willingness to admit error publicly and take responsibility completely had made me more influential, not less. This experience taught me what I came to call the dignity preservation principle in mistake recovery. When someone makes an error, our instinct is often to point out their fault, assign blame, or lecture them about better choices. But this approach destroys dignity and creates defensiveness. Instead, I learned to help people save face while still addressing the issue. When a student in my class shared incorrect information, I wouldn't say, "That's wrong, John." I would say, "That's an interesting perspective, John. I've seen some research that suggests a slightly different conclusion. Let me share what I've found." This approach allowed John to learn and correct his understanding without feeling humiliated in front of his peers. He could gracefully adjust his position without losing dignity. I developed what I called the graceful correction method. First, find something you can acknowledge or appreciate about their effort or intention. I can see you've really thought about this issue. Second, share new information as additional perspective rather than contradiction. Here's another way to look at it that you might find interesting. Third, allow them space to integrate the new information without pressure to immediately admit error. When dealing with my own mistakes, I learned that quick, complete acknowledgement actually increased rather than decreased respect. People don't expect perfection, they expect honesty. When you admit mistakes promptly and take full responsibility, you demonstrate the kind of character that builds trust rather than destroys it. The key is making room for everyone to be human, including yourself. The most successful leadership experiment I ever conducted happened not in a boardroom or lecture hall, but in my own small publishing company. In 1936, I decided to test whether the principles I taught about making others feel important could actually transform an entire organization's culture and productivity. My company employed 12 people: editors, secretaries, assistants, and office staff. Like most businesses of that era, we operated with traditional hierarchical management. I made decisions, gave orders, and expected compliance. Productivity was adequate, but I sensed my employees were capable of much more than they were delivering. I implemented what I called the importance revolution. Instead of treating my employees as subordinates, I began treating them as valuable partners whose contributions were essential to our shared success. I started by learning something meaningful about each person's life outside work. Sarah, my head secretary, was passionate about her daughter's education and worried about affording college tuition. Tom, my editor, dreamed of writing a novel but felt trapped by financial obligations. Margaret, who handled correspondence, had innovative ideas about organizing our filing system but had never been asked for her input. Then I began making each person feel genuinely important to our mission. Instead of just assigning tasks, I explained how their work connected to our larger goals. Sarah, your attention to detail in correspondence is crucial because every letter represents our reputation. People's first impression of our company comes through your work. Tom, your editing doesn't just correct grammar, ensures our ideas reach people in the clearest, most powerful way possible. The transformation was remarkable. Sarah began suggesting improvements to our correspondence systems. Tom started staying late to polish articles beyond what was required. Margaret redesigned our entire filing system, making it more efficient than I had ever imagined possible. But the real breakthrough came when I started involving everyone in decision-making. Instead of making unilateral choices about company direction, I began holding weekly meetings where everyone's input was genuinely valued. We're considering expanding our course offerings. What do you think would serve our students best? How can we improve our customer service based on what you're hearing from clients? The ideas that emerged were often better than anything I could have developed alone. Sarah suggested a follow-up system for course graduates that increased our referral rate by 40%. Tom proposed a newsletter that strengthened our relationship with former students and generated new enrollments. Margaret created a customer feedback system that helped us continuously improve our programs. Within 6 months, our productivity had increased dramatically, but more importantly, the entire atmosphere of our workplace had transformed. People arrived early, stayed late when needed, and took personal pride in our collective success. Sick days decreased, turnover disappeared, and creativity flourished. I realized I had discovered something profound about leadership. The most effective leaders don't demand importance for themselves, they create importance for others. When people feel genuinely valuable to an organization's mission, they will exceed expectations without being forced or manipulated. This approach challenged everything I had been taught about management. Traditional leadership said, establish authority, maintain control, reward compliance, punish deviation. But importance-based leadership operated on different principles. Share authority, encourage initiative, recognize contribution, develop potential. The key was authenticity. I wasn't manipulating my employees by making them feel important. I was recognizing importance that genuinely existed. Every person in our organization did contribute something valuable to our success. My job as a leader was to help them see and develop that value. This experiment taught me that leadership through importance creates a positive cycle. When people feel important, they act important, which makes them more valuable, which justifies treating them as important. The cycle builds on itself, creating continuously improving performance and satisfaction. The ultimate measure of leadership isn't how important you feel, it's how important you make others feel. The most humbling moment of my career came when my 8-year-old daughter Rosemary brought home a school project about heroes. When I saw my name on her poster, my heart swelled with pride and I read what she had written underneath my picture. My daddy teaches people how to be nice to each other, and sometimes he remembers to be nice to me too. That innocent sentence hit me like a thunderbolt. Here I was, traveling the country, teaching thousands of people how to make others feel important, while failing to consistently apply these principles with the people who mattered most, my own family. That night, I had a long conversation with Dorothy about how I could be such an expert on human relations in public while being so inconsistent at home. She was characteristically honest. Dale, you save your best attention for your students and audiences. By the time you come home, you're often tired and distracted. We get the leftover version of you. I realized that I had been treating my family relationships as automatic and secure, requiring less effort and attention than my professional relationships. This was backward thinking. The people who love us most deserve our best selves, not our leftover energy. I decided to deliberately apply my own principles at home, starting with making each family member feel genuinely important every single day. With Rosemary, this meant putting down my papers when she wanted to talk, asking about her day with the same focused attention I gave my students, and acknowledging her ideas and feelings as seriously as I would any adults. When she told me about playground drama, instead of dismissing it as childish, I would respond with, "That sounds really frustrating. Tell me more about what happened." The change in her response was immediate and profound. She began sharing more of her inner world with me, coming to me with problems and dreams she had previously kept to herself. I realized that children, like adults, bloom when they feel heard and valued. With Dorothy, I began applying the same appreciation and attention techniques that worked so well with my audiences. I started noticing and acknowledging her daily contributions. to our family's life. Dorothy, I appreciate how you create such a warm, welcoming home for us. When I walk through that door after a difficult day, I can feel the love and care you've put into everything. I learned to listen to her concerns about household management with the same respect I gave business problems when she felt overwhelmed by social obligations. Instead of offering quick solutions, I would validate her feelings. Managing all these relationships and commitments would feel overwhelming to anyone. You're doing remarkable work, holding everything together. The transformation in our marriage was remarkable. When Dorothy felt heard and appreciated at home, she became my strongest supporter in my work. She began offering insights about my teaching that improved my courses and helped me better understand my students' needs. I also began involving Rosemary in family decisions in age-appropriate ways, making her feel like a valued member of our team, rather than just a child to be managed. We're thinking about where to go for our summer vacation. What kind of activities would make it special for you? This simple inclusion made her feel important and invested in our family's happiness. The principle I discovered was that families, like any other organization, thrive when each member feels genuinely valued and important to the whole. Children who feel important at home develop confidence that serves them throughout life. Spouses who feel appreciated in their marriage become more loving and supportive partners. The irony was profound. The skills that made me successful professionally became even more powerful when applied consistently at home. The difference was that professional relationships are often temporary, but family relationships are meant to last a lifetime. The investment in making family members feel important pays dividends for decades. That school poster still hangs in my office, reminding me that the ultimate test of these principles isn't how they work with strangers, it's how they transform the relationships that matter most. The letter that taught me the most about human transformation came from the last person I ever expected to hear from, Harold Stevenson, a man who had spent 2 years trying to destroy my reputation and undermine my work. His letter, received in 1938, began, "Dear Dale, I owe you an apology and an explanation for my behavior. More importantly, I need to tell you how your response to my hostility changed, not just my opinion of you, but my entire approach to life." Harold had been a vocal critic of my courses, calling them superficial manipulation and psychological snake oil. In letters to newspapers and speeches to business groups, he had publicly challenged my methods, questioned my credentials, and encouraged people to boycott my programs. For most people, Harold would have been considered an enemy, someone to avoid, discredit, or fight. But I decided to apply my most advanced principle, finding ways to make even hostile people feel important and valued. This wasn't about winning him over or stopping his criticism. It was about testing whether genuine human dignity could transform even the most difficult relationships. My first step was to study Harold's criticisms carefully, looking for any valid points or legitimate concerns. I discovered that underneath his hostility was a genuine passion for helping people develop authentic confidence rather than superficial social skills. His concern was that my methods might encourage manipulation rather than genuine connection. Instead of defending myself or attacking his credentials, I wrote him a thoughtful letter acknowledging the wisdom in his concerns. "Mr. Stevenson, I've been reading your critiques of my work, and I want you to know that you've raised some important questions that have made me think more deeply about my approach. Your concern about authenticity versus manipulation is valid and valuable." I then invited him to meet with me, not to debate or convince him, but to learn from his perspective. "I would be honored to hear more of your thoughts about how people can develop genuine confidence and authentic relationships. Your background in psychology gives you insights that could help me serve my students better." The meeting was tense at first, Harold came prepared for an argument and seemed surprised by my genuine interest in his ideas. But as I asked thoughtful questions about his approach to human development and listened carefully to his responses, his defensiveness began to lower. The breakthrough came when I asked him about his own journey. What first sparked your passion for helping people develop authentic confidence? As Harold shared his story growing up with a father who used charm to manipulate others, his determination to find healthier approaches to human connection, I began to understand the source of his criticism. Harold wasn't just attacking my methods, he was protecting people from what he saw as potentially harmful manipulation based on his own painful experiences. When I acknowledged this concern and validated his protective intentions, something shifted in our relationship. Over the following months, Harold and I began a correspondence that transformed both of our approaches to teaching. His psychological insights helped me develop more authentic techniques, while my practical experience helped him make his theoretical knowledge more accessible to ordinary people. The letter I received from him a year later revealed the complete transformation. Dale, your willingness to listen to harsh criticism and find value in hostile opposition taught me something profound about human nature. If you could find something important and worthwhile in someone who is actively working against you, then perhaps I had been too quick to dismiss people who disagreed with me. Harold became one of my most effective collaborators, helping me refine my courses to emphasize authenticity over technique, genuine concern over strategic manipulation. More importantly, he began applying the same principles in his own work, looking for value in difficult clients rather than writing them off as resistant or hopeless. This experience taught me that there are no truly difficult people, only people whose importance we haven't yet discovered how to recognize and affirm. When you can find genuine value in your harshest critic, you've mastered the art of making others feel important at its highest level. By 1940, I had collected over 300 business cards, not from networking events or sales calls, but from genuine relationships built by making others feel valued in their professional lives. Each card represented someone who had become not just a contact, but a friend and advocate who actively supported my work and opened doors I could never have opened myself. The collection started accidentally. After my courses, students would often hand me their business cards with notes like "Please stay in touch" or "I'd love to help promote your work." Initially, I stored these cards out of politeness, but as I began following up with genuine interest in their professional journeys, I discovered something remarkable. When you make people feel important in their careers, they become invested in your success too. Take Robert Mitchell, a mid-level insurance manager who attended my 1937 course in Detroit. Instead of just thanking him for his participation, I followed up 6 months later with a letter asking about his progress. "Robert, I remember you mentioning your goal to become a regional manager. How has that journey been developing? I'd love to hear about any successes or challenges you've encountered." Robert's response revealed that he had been promoted, but was struggling with managing his new team. Rather than offering generic advice, I sent him specific strategies tailored to his situation, along with encouragement about the leadership qualities I had observed in him during the course. "You have a natural ability to see each person's potential," I wrote. "That gift will serve you well as you help your team members develop their own capabilities." 18 months later, Robert wrote to tell me he had been promoted agent, that he had recommended my courses to his entire company. Over the next 5 years, Robert's recommendations brought me over 200 new students. But more importantly, they brought me a lifelong friendship with someone whose professional growth I had genuinely supported. This pattern repeated itself hundreds of times when I took authentic interest in people's career development, remembered their goals and challenges, and offered relevant support and encouragement. They began seeing me not as a teacher they had once hired, but as a partner in their success. I learned to apply this principle systematically. After every course, I would make notes about each participant's professional aspirations. Sarah wanted to start her own business. Tom hoped to become a college professor. Margaret was working toward a promotion in her accounting firm. These weren't just polite conversation topics, they were opportunities to make each person feel important by supporting their individual dreams. I would send relevant articles I discovered, make introductions when I met people who could help them, and celebrate their achievements when they shared good news. When Sarah's business succeeded, I asked her to speak to future classes about entrepreneurship. When Tom completed his doctorate, I congratulated him and asked for his insights on effective teaching methods. When Margaret received her promotion, I acknowledged her hard work and asked her advice about working with financial professionals. The professional network that grew up from this approach was unlike anything I had seen other speakers and teachers develop. Instead of transactional relationships based on mutual advantage, I had created what I called an importance network, a web of professionals who supported each other because they felt genuinely valued and cared for as individuals. This network became the foundation of my career growth. When companies wanted to hire speakers, my advocates recommended me. When I needed insights about specific industries or regions, my network provided expert knowledge. When I faced business challenges, I had hundreds of successful professionals willing to offer advice and support. The key insight was that professional networking isn't about collecting contacts. It's about cultivating relationships by making others feel important in their work lives. When you genuinely care about someone's professional success and actively support their growth, you're not just building a contact, you're creating an advocate. The most powerful discovery was that this approach made me better at my own work. By staying connected to the real challenges and successes of working professionals, I kept my teaching relevant and practical. My courses improved because they were informed by ongoing relationships with people applying these principles in real business situations. The business cards in my collection represented more than professional connections. They represented lives touched, careers advanced, and relationships built on the foundation of mutual importance and genuine care. Asterisk, the telegram that arrived at my office on December 8, 1941, taught me that the principles of making others feel important become most crucial during humanity's darkest hours. The message was from Lieutenant James Morrison, a former student who was writing from a military hospital in Hawaii after the Pearl Harbor attack. Mr. Carnegie, your lessons about making others feel valued are keeping our unit together through hell. Please keep teaching. The world needs this more than ever. The Second World War tested everything I had learned about human connection. As my students went off to fight, got married quickly before deployment, lost loved ones, and faced uncertainty about their futures, I discovered that making others feel important wasn't just a tool for success, it was a lifeline for survival. The letters I received from former students during those war years revealed something profound about human resilience. Those who maintained strong connections, who felt valued and important to others, weathered the crisis with greater strength than those who faced their challenges alone. Captain William Hayes wrote from the Pacific Theater, "Dale, I'm using your principles to keep morale up in my company. When we're pinned down and exhausted, I make sure to acknowledge each man's contribution. Johnson's steady aim, Peterson's calm under fire, Rodriguez's ability to keep everyone's spirits up. Recognizing their importance to our mission helps them remember who they are beyond this nightmare." On the home front, I watched families struggle with separation, uncertainty, and loss. I learned that the principles I had taught for business and social situations became even more powerful when applied to crisis support. When my neighbor, Martha, received news that her son was missing in action, I didn't offer empty optimism or try to minimize her pain. Instead, I focused on making her feel important in her grief. Martha, your strength during this impossible time is remarkable. The way you're continuing to care for your younger children while carrying this burden shows incredible courage. Your son would be proud of how you're holding your family together. This acknowledgement of her strength in suffering didn't eliminate her pain, but it helped her feel seen and valued during her darkest hour. Rather than feeling like a victim of circumstances, she began to see herself as someone playing an important role in her family's survival. I developed what I called crisis importance principles. First, acknowledge the reality of their struggle without trying to fix or minimize it. This is incredibly difficult, and what you're going through would challenge anyone. Second, recognize their strength in facing the challenge. The way you're handling this situation shows remarkable resilience. Third, affirm their importance to others who depend on them. Your family needs your strength, and you're providing it even when it's hard. The war also taught me about the importance of maintaining connection during separation. I encouraged my students to write letters that made their loved ones feel important and valued, not just missed. Instead of only expressing loneliness, I suggested they write about specific qualities they appreciated, memories that brought them strength, and hopes for the future that centered on the other person's well-being. Dorothy and I applied these principles when our own family faced wartime challenges, when rationing made daily life difficult. Instead of focusing on what we lacked, we acknowledged each family member's contribution to our adaptation. Rosemary, your creativity in finding ways to make our meals special with limited ingredients shows real resourcefulness. The most powerful lesson came from watching how communities survived the war. Neighborhoods where people had cultivated relationships based on mutual importance and care pulled together more effectively than those where people had remained strangers. Making others feel important during good times created reserves of connection that sustained people through crisis. Asterisk. The most meaningful documents in my possession aren't my published books or honorary degrees. They're the final class evaluation forms from my last course in 1954. These handwritten reflections from students reveal not just what they learned, but how feeling important had transformed their entire approach to life and relationships. Margaret Thompson wrote, "Mr. Carnegie, your course didn't just teach me techniques for getting along with people. It taught me to see every person I meet as someone with inherent dignity and value. This has changed how I treat the grocery clerk, my difficult neighbor, my teenage children, and even myself. I realize now that I had been living in a world where only certain people seemed to matter. Now everyone matters." This reflection captured something I had begun to understand about the true power of making others feel important. It creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate relationship. When you learn to recognize and affirm the importance of one person, you develop the ability to see the value in everyone. Robert Chen, a shy accountant who had barely spoken during his first class, wrote, "6 months ago, I felt invisible in my own life. Learning that I could make others feel valued and important gave me a sense of purpose I had never experienced. But here's what surprised me most as I focused on making others feel important. I began to feel important myself, not because of what I achieved, but because of how I was contributing to other people's lives. This was the unexpected gift I had discovered in my own journey. The more you practice making others feel important, the more important you feel, not in an egotistical way, but in a deeply meaningful way. You begin to see yourself as someone who makes a positive difference in the world, one interaction at a time." Sarah Williams, a mother of 3, captured the multiplication effect. "My children are now teaching their friends these principles. My husband has started applying them at work. My neighbors have noticed the change in how our family interacts. It's like dropping a stone in a pond. The ripples just keep spreading." This was perhaps the most exciting discovery of my career. The art of making others feel important was contagious. When people experienced being truly valued and heard, they naturally began treating others the same way. Students would return to tell me how their children, spouses, colleagues, and friends had begun commenting on positive changes in their behavior. I realized I had been teaching more than social skills or success strategies. I had been teaching a way of being in the world that could transform entire communities. Every person who learned to make others feel important became a teacher of these principles, whether they realized it or not. The evaluation forms revealed something else profound. Student after student wrote about how these principles had changed their relationship with themselves. I stopped being so critical of my own mistakes when I learned to extend grace to others. Focusing on other people's potential helped me see my own possibilities more clearly. Making others feel important taught me that I am important too. This internal transformation was the foundation that made all the external changes possible. When you truly understand the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, you can't help but include yourself in that understanding. Thomas Bradley, a business executive, wrote something that particularly moved me. Mr. Carnegie, you taught me that making others feel important isn't just about being nice or getting ahead. It's about participating in something larger than yourself, the ongoing creation of a world where people feel valued and connected rather than invisible and alone. This captured the ultimate vision I had come to hold for this work. Every person who learned to make others feel important was participating in a quiet revolution, transforming workplaces into communities, families into havens of support, and neighborhoods into networks of care. The legacy of importance wasn't just about individual relationships, it was about creating a culture where human dignity was recognized and affirmed as a matter of course. These evaluation forms showed me that this vision was possible, one person at a time, one interaction at a time, one relationship at a time. Asterisk, the small card I carried in my wallet for the last 20 years of my teaching career contained a simple, daily challenge that transformed not just my relationships, but my entire sense of purpose in life. The card, worn soft from handling, read, "Today, I will make at least one person feel genuinely important. I will look for their unique value, acknowledge their contribution, and help them see their own worth more clearly." This wasn't just a technique or strategy, it became my personal mission, my way of participating in something larger than my own success or happiness. Every morning, as I reviewed that card, I was committing to use my day to make someone else's life better in a meaningful way. The beauty of this commitment was its simplicity and accessibility. You don't need special credentials, advanced training, or perfect social skills to make someone feel important. You just need to pay attention, care genuinely, and express that care in ways the other person can feel and receive. Start with recognition. Look for opportunities to acknowledge people who usually go unnoticed: the janitor who keeps your building clean, the cashier who handles hundreds of customers with patience, the colleague who quietly keeps projects running smoothly. A simple, "I notice how much care you put into your work, and it makes a real difference," can transform someone's entire day. Practice deep listening in your very next conversation. Instead of waiting for your turn to talk, focus completely on understanding what the other person is trying to communicate. Listen not just to their words, but to their emotions, their concerns, their hopes. When someone feels truly heard, they feel important in the most fundamental way. Master the art of specific appreciation. Instead of generic compliments like "good job," learn to recognize particular qualities and contributions. Your ability to stay calm under pressure helped everyone focus on solutions rather than panic. The way you explained that complex concept made it accessible to everyone in the room. Your encouragement last week gave me the confidence to take on this new challenge. Develop what I call importance radar. the ability to quickly identify what makes each person feel valued. Some people feel important when their expertise is recognized. Others feel valued when their personal qualities are acknowledged. Still others feel important when their efforts are appreciated, regardless of results. Pay attention to what lights people up and focus your attention there. Apply these principles first and most consistently with the people closest to you. Your family members, close friends, and daily colleagues deserve your best efforts at making them feel important, not your leftover energy. These relationships provide the foundation that allows you to extend importance to everyone you meet. Remember that making others feel important doesn't require perfection, it requires authenticity. People can sense the difference between genuine care and manipulative technique. When your motivation is truly to recognize and affirm someone's value, they will feel it regardless of your delivery style or word choice. Measure your success not by what you receive, but by what you give. The goal isn't to get people to like you, help you, or serve your interests. The goal is to participate in their flourishing as human beings. When you focus on giving importance rather than getting recognition, you'll discover that you receive more genuine appreciation and support than you ever could through self-promotion. Start your importance revolution today. Before you finish reading this, identify one person in your life who deserves to feel more valued and appreciated. Think specifically about what makes them valuable, their character, their efforts, their unique contributions to your life or work. Then find a way to express that appreciation clearly and specifically. The principles I've shared with you aren't just ideas to consider, they're practices to implement immediately. Every relationship in your life can be transformed by your commitment to making others feel genuinely important. Your family, your workplace, your community, and ultimately your world will become more connected, more supportive, and more human. The revolution begins with you. Today, with the very next person you encounter, make them feel important and watch how it changes everything.